Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome to Organic Frequency Radio with Stephanie and Oksana. We are on today, again, Monday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time, USA. And we are here to yet another have and host another amazing show that is coming up with an amazing guest. And we will be chatting very soon with the guest, and we'll be actually giving an introduction. But for now, I guess, wanted to have a little intro. Stephanie is going to be joining me very shortly. She's in the studio, but she will be joining in a few minutes. And I guess just to start even talking a little bit about the topic that we have, which will be very much connected to ascension and symptoms and awakening to your truth and to everything around that seems like to some people reality, but in reality it's not. So myself, I've been going through very many changes in my life in the past, especially the past year. My change has been going on for some time, but drastic changes started to take place about a year ago, even more now. And just even a few minutes ago, Stephanie and I were discussing how it is different to theoretically understand what awakening is, what ascension symptoms are there, but when you really start walking the path and really start detaching from things and being fully present in the now and really surrendering to now, it's a completely different experience. It starts becoming one, your wisdom, and wisdom is only gained through personal experience. But how different it can be just to, have a nice, lovely conversation with somebody who knows what's going on, but not necessarily walk the path, and who has walked the path, and who experienced this very, very, those moments that you do, in a sense, even treasure because you realize that everything becomes reality when you stepped into this path of ascension, really, because any weight you have, energetic weight, will have to come off, whether ease or not ease, but it's coming off when you're staying true to the path of evolution. And I hope that we can have an amazing conversation today about that as well. And in fact, we probably will be bringing more and more guests, those that walk the path, not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk. And because I would like to meet more people who are walking the walk and compare these stories and compare, sharing, not compare for the sake of compare, but for the sake of sharing of experiences. And also because I am writing books and I'm writing my own autobiography book, it's just amazing and very interesting for me to observe what happens when you start really getting down and dirty with your truth and what your path and what needs to fall off of your energetic attachments, emotions, and physicality, of course. Well, I think I am going to go and read about our special guest today because I don't want to wait another minute. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm ready for it. So, okay. Damian Nola, born and raised in London, a keen interest in the esoteric, complementary therapies, and energetic forms of healing has accompanied Aminya. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I will ask Damian later, for as long as he can recall, leading him in his early and late teenage years to study various healing modalities as a system of support to further his own process of inner growth and gently guide others through the challenges on their path. Over many years of offering his kind of assistance to both individuals and groups all over the world, a profound focus of relationship with divine, particularly within the form of Divine Mother, then began to grow, and in his early 30s reactivated a remembrance of his past life connections with the feminine lineage of womb mysteries from which the work he now offers is sourced. The core of his work currently takes the form of awakening the threefold qualities of the heart known by many different names within varying spiritual traditions, but most commonly referred to as love, light, and power. Light being a clear seeing of reality as it truly is, the development of wisdom, inspiration, and alignment with truth. Love being the expression of the open, undefended, and authentic heart, true intimacy and connection, and power being a focus of surrender into the flow of life. The awakening of these three essential qualities of heart, providing an opening into recognition of how it is we can truly meet all facets of life from the truth of what we are, and in that we bring healing or resolution to what may be imbalanced, come into harmony and the natural non conditioned expression of essence. Well, let me welcome Damian on air and let's go into all of that.
Thank you for
Hello,
that
Damian.
beautiful introduction. Hello,
Hello, Damian. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's beautiful to have this time to share a little with you.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Um, so, usually, what we do at the beginning, we would like to ask you, how did you get to the point where you are now? Because everyone has a wake up call, whether it's physical issues, emotional, maybe even other things. How did you um, get to the point of being where you are now, helping others already at this point?
This has really been a core aspect of my life for as long as I can recall. As a child, as many people probably listening to the call, maybe even yourself, very sensitive, very aware of the existence of other realms, angels, archangels, etc. A deep interest in the esoteric, just as something that was naturally present, without really knowing where it came from in that way. That developed to around about 13 years of age, where I had a near death experience. And
Mm-hmm.
during that experience, there was the dissolution of what one might call the sense of self. So that whole conditioned sense of Damien as a individual I,
Mm-hmm.
the story of Damien, all of the stuff that goes into forming that. And following that, there was a long period of probably about 7 or 8 years of integrating that experience. Obviously, being 13, going through puberty and school and trying to sort of reintegrate and embody that experience in a way. And then when I was around 22 or 23, there was a shift with that and a sense of coming back more back into what one could call one's humanity in a certain way. And I'll speak about that more later, but just to offer a brief introduction now of my process, that sense of reintegrating into one's humanity with that, and then really coming from that free space in that way, and moving into working with groups in that way, supporting people really to open into that space of freedom within themselves. That's really the core of the work that I present within the world. It's really how do one step into authentic freedom in life.
Beautiful. Well, and I always say, Damian, that the work, I guess, what we do, because I also have my own practice, as Stephanie does as well. It has a different angle when a person is aware of that internal freedom and aware of who he is internally, or the person doesn't. I think that's very important step in the process, like you said, to bring people into that place of, sense of expansion and freedom within. And if they are, walking that path, then the kind of a coaching work becomes very different, opposed to when they're still not seeing life through the eyes of God. Or source, however you call it. So I guess my quick question, because I'm personally curious myself, how does that affect your work with your clients or people in general? Do you try to bring them first into the place of knowing, or you take them step at a time to get to that place within?
It's a continually unfolding process, to my understanding. So there's no real point of arrival with it. In my experience, it's a constantly deepening experience of the discovery of that, and a constant further focus of the embodiment of that and how we actually live from that within the world. I work with a whole variety of different people. With some people, it's that process of opening to that awakening, clearing conditioning, clearing the veils of identification with their story, that egoic sense of self in that way. And with other people, it's the process of the embodiment of that. I know a lot of people who've had very profound spiritual awakenings, but they're not necessarily embodied in that. And so it's more of a sort of background awareness. And the work then becomes the sense of how does one actually live from that and embody that within the world. And so, to my sense of such, awakening really has two movements that we can look at in terms of the vertical movement and the horizontal movement in that way. And the vertical movement would be that sense of deepening in that focus of awakening. So that sense of how deeply are we embodied within that. And the horizontal movement could be seen as the sense of expanding that awakening in a way, opening to deeper levels of that.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. So I guess a lot of our listeners already aware of awakening and kind of what in general it means. But from your knowledge and practice, can you just give us a little bit of what awakening is and what I guess what are the steps in your perception? Because all of us walking through that, but like what is your perception of major steps through awakening, if you think there are some?
Yeah. So, to my understanding, basic awakening is where that sense of I, or that sense of separate self, collapses, and there's an intellectual understanding of that in the sense of I am not the separate self or my story about myself. And there are a lot of people who may get that intellectually, but there's a whole energetic component of that. Also, if it was just as simple as an intellectual thing of I am not the separate self, there'd be hundreds, if not thousands, of people or more walking around genuinely awake. But there's an entire energetic experience that accompanies that, whereby the whole energetic experience of oneself as that separate self collapses. And what that creates, from my experience of such, is a certain kind of opening within the energy system through which divinity then begins to bridge through the energetic system more deeply. And we could call that basic awakening. And then the depth of that deepens to deeper levels, where there's a deeper bridging of that divine focus through the energy system in that way. Does that answer your question very briefly?
Yes, yes, it does. It does. I guess more. Well, because I've heard, and I have my own perception about the process of this awakening, and you say it's deepening, and connecting deepening the bridge and connecting all of that. But I guess what I also play in my head, at least, and in my perception, there are also like levels of, which is part of deepening anyway, but there are levels, for example, where, just one example, where at one point you lose your identity as, for example, as I am Oksana, and
Yes.
then you go through that process, which is, it's extremely confusing process, but you have to go through that, and then you are reawakened to a different, I don't know, I don't want to call it personality, but a different state of still I am, but not the old I am. Is that something you can touch upon?
Yes. What generally happens within those experiences is what one is going into is a deeper experience of the truth of oneself. And so, if we look at ultimately the source of all identity being divinity in that way, so what happens in terms of what you spoke about, where there's that sense of awakening from out of the sense of I am Oksana or I am Damian, is the I in terms of the sense of egoic self. And so that collapses, and then there's an
Mm-hmm.
opening into the deeper truth of who we are as the I am presence, but the I am presence there being divinity, being the truth of who we are. Um, so there's also a lot of talk in the ascension community, awakening community around the sense of connecting with one's sense of higher self also, and the opening to that. And from my own experience, the experience of many people with whom I work, that's also a certain level that one arrives at and then awakens through and beyond in that way. So even that begins to drop away. And what is deeper, even in the sense of higher self, begins to emerge and bridge through the system. If you think of the higher self as being like a subtler sense of self that exists on a higher dimensional level, so there's a lot of light there and a lot of love there, and secrets really in the name, higher self. So there's still the sense of self there in a certain way. So there's still very, very subtle ego there in a way, not the dense ego that we experience here in that contracted sense, but and it becomes difficult to speak about unless somebody's actually had the experience of that,
Mhm.
because one is really just speaking about it, so it can be just taken as purely conceptual or intellectual. Um, but what I can say, and people may get a sense of such simply through me describing it, is even beyond that sense of higher self, if one really allows that sense of self to filter out completely and then opens to what's actually beyond that also. So as you say, it's that deepening, opening into a sense of, okay, I'm no longer Oksana, and then that deeper sense of I am begins to arise from beyond, and then even a dropping away of that, and then even a dropping away of that, even a dropping away of that. And so it's really that surrender through mystery that begins to
Mhm.
arise as we open into the unknown and surrender into that. And that's really where that bridging of divinity arises from.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's quite a process.
That it is.
It's quite a yeah. So and okay. So what can you say? I guess I'm trying to see whether we take you more into a practical aspect of it or not. Do you feel like going more practical about it or not, Damian?
I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Any direction you want to take it, I'm very happy.
Because we still have a lot of topics to talk about. Well, I'm curious, what is your take on? Because a lot of people, including us, going through this process, and as we like Stephanie and I were talking about earlier, how every person has their own levels of attachment and different types of attachments to physicality. In fact, I started writing a book about it as well, so I'll be gathering a lot of interesting information, but I'm also using a lot of my personal experience because I've had to go through a massive detachment process this past year and realizing, the levels of my attachment. So, what can you suggest? Because, you know, surrendering to now and allowing the flow of life to take you where it needs. But what can you suggest as practical tools and helpful tips you can suggest to those that are going through this detachment process, ascension process?
Well, this really links into the three elements path. So those are love, light, and power.
Mm.
We really begin with on the path is love. And love is, as we begin with that, it's really that focus of compassion. Starts with that focus of compassion for self in that way. And really recognizing that our fundamental essence is innocent. So we enter into life innocently. And self care for ourselves in that way also. And through that, we begin to actually develop wisdom in that way. Wisdom is that clear seeing of reality, that clear alignment with truth and with our authenticity in that way. And the combination of that compassion and that clear seeing of reality opens us to power. And power, it has been very misunderstood in the world. Uh, Sometimes misunderstood also in the New Age community, in my opinion, in terms of the whole sense of I can have power to manifest my life and create X, Y, Z, etc., 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 which, in my opinion, is really more coming from the ego's desire to want to be in control and survival stuff in that way. From my experience, my sense of such, that real focus of power is real surrender into the flow. That's really when one is in one's place of power, true power and freedom in that way. And so, if I was to give any advice to the listeners, it would really be like the combination of those three elements. So, firstly, on a practical level, just connecting with the heart space each day, dropping into that space and sitting there and just opening to love there and recognizing that that's not something that can be generated or faked. It's more just an invitation to the arising of that. So I have a daily practice where I sit for maybe 10, 15 minutes each morning, just drop into the heart space and just open to that arising of love. And then from that space of connection with love, holding that focus of connection with truth and allowing that to arise through my system, sitting with what is the truth here that I can bring forth into the world through my actions, through my speech, and allowing that to arise. And it can sound a bit conceptual at first, a bit intellectual or heady, but it's just an invitation to sit with. It's not something that one has to get right or wrong. We can get very stuck in this whole sort of concept of I have this exercise that I need to get right or wrong. And the invitation isn't that. It's just to sit and explore and to open to that without going into this whole headspace of am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Because that just takes one into headspin in that way. It's more the invitation of, okay, just to examine what happens when I drop within, when I sit in the core of my being, the core of my heart, and really open to love and light, and just allow that to arise. And all of us can do that. We can just drop in and sit and go, okay, what happens? What do I sense? What do I feel? What opens in my system when I sit with that? What's here when I sit with that? So there's no way in which we can get it right or wrong, as it were, because we're just with our direct experience in that moment. So that's what I would suggest is a very simple practice, just as a start point, that people can sit with for 10, 15 minutes each day and just discover how that begins to transform one's experience of life.
And what can you say about the light, the second one?
So the light is really that focus of wisdom. It's really that focus of alignment with truth. So how are we really living from the truth of what we are? Most of us are very conditioned to live from what we've learnt, what we believe, etc., etc., etc. And we do that unconsciously all of the time. We're just living on autopilot, as it were, acting unconsciously. And so light is really that focus of how do I align with the truth? How do I align with that which is free within myself, which is not coming from conditioned habitual response to circumstance or to life in that way? The way in which we open to that, similar exercise to what I just described, it's that dropping into the heart space, sitting with truth, sitting with our direct experience. Because as we sit with our heart, as we sit with our essence, it will show us the truth of our direct experience here. And it's like anything, learning to play the piano, learning to ride a bike, learning to drive a car. It's something that develops through our practice with that. It's just a gentle invitation to open to that. And also to be compassionate with ourselves through that focus of love and through that space of recognizing that we are innocent, We are going to make mistakes. It happens. It's part and parcel of the process of life. Part and parcel. Part and parcel. Yep, that's the words I'm looking for. Thank you. Of
Yes.
how we grow and how we learn in that way.
Mhm.
And so
And
a
I
lot
guess,
of people.
mhm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead. You go ahead.
A lot of people can have that concept around light in terms of the sense of psychism, or the sense
Mm.
of the the experience of like super consciousness and being tapped in and channeling and all of that kind of stuff, which is beautiful experience. Um, and that's one level of it. And as it begins to open in that way, there is the experience of opening to that in a certain way. Uh, but beyond that, it's really that sense of alignment with truth in that way. And so there's a point for many people on the path where there's that sense of opening through the third eye, through the higher chakras, in that more, shall we say, multidimensional perception, psychic type way, and connection with higher dimensional beings, angels, archangels, ascended masters, etc., etc. Uh, but there tends to be a point where actually all of that drops away in a certain way, and all that actually remains is really just truth. And certainly within my own experience, there was a long period of time where there was a lot of that psychic phenomena, um, really to the point that it was like watching a movie in a certain way. And
Yeah.
probably about 10 years ago or so, a lot of that just dropped away. And it's now more a sense of the mind being very still, um, not really any internal movement of mind or voice, and just knowing, dropping in that way. And that's something that people may discover for themselves on the path in that way, as there's a alignment with inner light or truth. It's just this sense
Hmm.
of knowing that arises, um, and it's not really linked to the sense of having psychic power in that way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, from that point, as you mentioned, um, power comes in, which, it's not what typically is advertised as being power, but power of being, you know, everything you never thought you are.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you really think of power being that deep embodiment within one's heart and that deep alignment with truth, and you think of how powerful someone is who's deeply embodied in heart and deeply aligned with truth, coming from that space. So it's not any show of egoic power, which ultimately really is coming from, in my opinion and experience, issues of powerlessness and control and survival and fear, etc., etc. It's power that's coming from that space of complete freedom, complete alignment with truth, complete alignment with love and compassion in that way. Um, and so it has really nothing to do with ego or control or the sense of I have the power to manifest this or control this or to do this or to create this. It's really a complete surrender to what you are. Um, and if you see, for example, the great avatars or masters that have walked before us and are currently incarnate on the earth, such as Ramana or Amma, completely embodied in service unconditionally. And to my understanding and experience, that's that's real humility and real power.
Yes, now we just need to bring everyone to that space, right?
Well, that's yes and no. I mean, that's partly the dream, the dream of ego of bringing everybody to that space. And I would say that from my experience, as far as I can know, there is a natural focus of evolution that is moving all of life towards that in a certain way. Um, but there's also the play of duality within that, that's unfolding that process in a certain way. There's also, the dance and the play of life in that way. And really the understanding that that dance and play is perfect. And that can sound very glib from one level and very conceptual and very intellectual in one way, but it's when it's really seen, it's the understanding that everything is in its right place in that way. There is a divine unfolding and perfection to everything. And from one level, the ego can look at that and say, well, if everything's perfect, then why do I have to do anything whatsoever? And I would say that's just the ego's response to it in that way. It doesn't mean that nothing is done. It's meant that it means that, okay, this is arising perfectly in this moment. What is perfect and right response to what is arising in this moment? So it's not the ego sits there and goes, oh, everything's perfect, so I'm going to do nothing. What actually arises is a sense of, okay, what is perfect and right response to what is arising here in this moment, here now. And so within my own experience of life, sometimes that's been, people have come to me and asked for help. And sometimes perfect and right response is, here's help. Other times the truth has absolutely been perfect and right response is not to help here. And intellectually, I can look at it and go, I have no idea why that is. But the truth of the heart is saying, it's their life, their path. You can't get involved in that way. And again, living from truth, living from light, living from wisdom is really learning to be embodied in that. And also living from the truth of love and compassion in that way. Sometimes it can be the most loving and compassionate thing to say, I can't help here in the way that you want me to. I can be here. I can hold space for you. I can hold the space of love. But actually, it's more loving for me to let you live your own life rather than to get involved from the conditioned space of what I think being loving and doing the right thing is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I also
certainly know that's got me into lots of trouble before. I've gone, I know what the right thing to do is and how to help people.
I've done it too. Oh, yes. Yes.
But there you go.
Well, that takes me to the next step is where we can talk a little bit more about ascension. And because you've touched upon duality, and from my experience in the dimension that we reside majority of our life, is very, very dualistic. And from my perception and knowledge and life, it creates more duality than other state of beings, Aka dimensions. So what can you say about duality and our existence in general, not necessarily 3-dimension, but perhaps other dimensions, how duality exists in those from your knowledge and perspective and practice and life?
Yeah. So ultimately, everything is serving divine will, the divine purpose, the bigger picture that we don't know from this level in that way. And so if we look at duality really being that realm which serves the focus of our awakening in that way, if we look at the earth as being, a kind of place or school, for want of a better word, that we come to wake up to our true nature. And really fundamentally, we do that through suffering in a way. And it's really ultimately where we come to a point through suffering, generally speaking, where we go, there has to be more to life than this. There has to be more to life than survival, control, fear, etc., etc., etc. And something turns around within us in that way. And we begin to look beyond purely just trying to survive. We begin to look back towards our source in a certain way. If you think of the millennia, we've been looking outward in a certain direction, looking towards survival, control, fear, our story, our drama. Over millennia, that's just built and built and built and built and built and built through our experience of duality, through our experience of being this separate self, to a point where we just go, enough. And somehow, miraculously, through grace, something occurs within us, and we turn and we shift. And we begin that process of awakening or ascension in that way. And so it's not that duality is wrong in any way, shape, or form. It's just as much an expression of divinity as anything else. It's really simply serving that purpose or that process through which we awaken and through which we come home to ourselves in that way. And if we can really understand duality or the ego as that and not as something vilified or made wrong or something that needs to be somehow gotten rid of, but rather recognize it as simply part of our process, a stage in our growth, similar to childhood. In that way, our entire relationship with it begins to shift.
Yeah, duality is definitely a very interesting topic to speak about because um, I'm sure you've gone through your stages, and everyone else, including myself, is where you catch yourself, kind of, maybe criticizing or judging the bad or good, and then you get to terms with like, okay, this is happening, that's what it is. And duality kind of disappears one step at a time because you do see everything as playing out the way it's supposed to and the way it's meant to unfold. So, but at least in the beginning, yeah, for me, I remember um, having a little bit of a hard time because, understanding how duality can be painful for people and it's suffering and it's you see it everywhere and you just want to step in and help and bring them to light and do all that stuff, but and at the end you realize, or in the process you realize, that it's a process of awakening, just like you said, to see the opposites and realize what is the preference, I guess, and how do you create those opposite aspects of yourself in outside world.
Absolutely, and that's really where that focus of love and light comes in that way. It's that focus of compassion extended to all of life and that deep desire to bring oneself and others out of suffering. And really, that requires the wisdom to recognize why people suffer in that way. But it also requires the compassion and the love and the wisdom to meet people where they're at also. So, for example, with yourself, I'd have a completely different conversation than to somebody at the very beginning of the path in a certain way. For certain people, I can understand that they're very much enmeshed in their story and their suffering, and it's no point me saying to them, your story is just a story, because they're not going to hear it as that. They truly believe that their story is real. And so it's meeting them with love and compassion and wisdom in that way. Whereas for another person, it's guiding them and directing them to recognize that your story is just a story in that way. And they're able to hear that and able to open to that in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Damian, we actually have a guest with a question.
Sure.
Are you open to questions? You
Absolutely.
ready?
Yeah.
All right. 1 second. Welcome to Organic Frequency Radio Show. Do you have a question for Damian?
G'day, Damian. G'day, Oksana.
Hello.
Damian, my name is Bob, and I'm an ex-Berkshire boy. I used to live in the Vale of the White Horse, but now I'm residing in the Whitsunday Islands in Australia. And it's not so much a question, Damian, as I just want to support you in what you've been sharing, because your journey resonates so strongly with mine. Talking about some of the words you used really triggered some stuff for me, and I'd just like to share that quickly, if that's okay with you, Damian.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, mate. Thanks for your time and your attention. I've had an awesome life, and how can I put it? How can I put it? Yeah, I decided probably about 15 years ago to live my life consciously and take full responsibility for everything that happens in my life. And it was about that time I became a ship's captain. And the first time I took a boat out was, oh my God, Bob, the buck stops here, mate. You're totally responsible for everything that happens on this vessel. Now, all I did was take that ideology and apply it to my life. So I became master and commander of my life. And as master and commander, I thought, well, what's my purpose? So I set my life purpose to be to simply find my own truth. So bang, we got the big one out of the way. And then, as a spiritual being, having a physical experience, how do I want to experience this life? And so I set my own conscious life intention, which is, I am here to have a gentle, joyful, loving, and abundant life. So that I am here to have is my command to the universe, but also my address to the universe. So ever since I put those two in place, that's just how my life is unfolding in a loving, joyful, gentle, and abundant way. And I also consciously decided to move from living in head space to living in heart space. Now, for me, that means, for me, religion is head space, spirituality is heart space. Thinking is head space, knowing is heart space. So when I sit quietly with myself, I found this place I call my knowing, and my knowing has no words. It's just an awesome feeling of power, but it's like a cotton wool power. But I feel as if I'm made of titanium. There's such a strength in that. And through that place of knowing and in the silence, I connect to somewhere that I call the galactic universe, the universal galactic library of all that there is to know. And so, this stuff just comes down and through. And it's amazing. And so much you've shared, really in different words, resonates with my own journey. Now, I am that I am, and I am content with me. And how can I put it? How can I put it? I view myself as a raindrop in the ocean of consciousness, the ocean of creation. But I can still identify the raindrop that I am. And for me, the evolution of consciousness is exponential. And it's just turned the corner, and we're in for a wild ride. It's brilliant. It's absolutely amazing. So, I love what you're sharing, Damian. And it's nice to hear somebody that's hit the same signposts, if you like. And I believe that I've been a parent, and so what amazed me looking back is a phenomenon I call the erosion of innocence. Now, I love watching kids that are about 2.5 years old. They're tottering around with starfish fingers, and the world is wonderful and magical. But by the time they're 6, 7, or 8 years old, that's all beaten out of them, and I really feel sad about that. For it's, why don't we take that beautiful, magical connection and innocence and build from there? So, this society that we're currently supporting has got a lot to answer for. But I'd better shut up, Damian, because I can talk for hours on this, man. This is such beautiful work, such beautiful work. I'll be glad of any feedback.
Thank you for your sharing. Very beautiful. Very beautiful. Yes, absolutely what you talk about in terms of the erosion of innocence. Looking at it, as I was saying earlier, obviously from this intellectual type space, it's the sense of what the hell are we doing in that space? And then it's a dropping into that deeper space of truth. Also, recognizing it's part and parcel of our experience here now. Doesn't mean it's not going to change in that way, but it's how do we respond to that through right action in that space? How do we really bring the truth and compassion to that, recognizing that that's part and parcel of their experience, their growth, their journey here, and part and parcel of our growth, our experience, our karma, our service in the world. So how do I respond to that? How can I be present with that from a place of truth and not from a place of trying to control or manipulate, from a place of this is how their experience should look or should be, but really just to be in that place of heart and that place of openness and that place of innocence with them, that place of innocence where we don't know. And through that, mystery can arise, divinity can arise, freedom can arise in that way. Because so much of us trying to come from good intention, I certainly know in my own experience and the past, has created a mess in that way. And the sense of I'm trying to come from good intention, but ultimately I don't always know what good intention is.
May I respond, Damian?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm 65 now, and as I say, my life's been an awesome journey. The platform I stand on now is, I believe, all are equal, all are unique, and all are sovereign. And I really identified with the statement about, I used to work as a counselor, I came to the realization that I cannot wake anybody up, that is their choice, they either will or they won't.
Yeah.
And I believe the best thing I can do, really, and it's working for me, is to simply to let my own light shine. I went back and healed the wounds of my childhood, got rid of all the crap I was carrying, and then went through an investigative process, if you like, of challenging everything I'd ever been taught or everything I'd learned. And if it no longer resonated with my heart, it was not my truth. So I'm really comfortable now with my own truth. And just through shining my light, I'm making some amazing connections. And people come out to me and say, Bob, well, as an example, last year I lost my home, I lost everything to Cyclone Debbie. It came and took my boat away and threw it up into the trees. They had to use a chainsaw to get it out. And people are going, oh, Bob, but you've lost everything. You've lost everything. And I said, well, I may have lost material things, but I've learned a really valuable lesson, to let go of the attachment to things. I managed to save my 2 dogs and me. And so for me now, every event in my life, which I create my life, is a lesson. And I just need to find whatever that lesson is, in that event. But this is well, I love this one. I had to go out of my mind to come to my senses, because it's my heart and my feelings now that guide my path, that lead the way. So thanks, Damian. And we were born to giggle. I reckon we were born to giggle. I wake up giggling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, why wouldn't you, eh?
Oh, yeah.
I've sent you a friend request, by the way, David. So.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
But it's from my little dog. I use his Facebook page because I like looking at the world through the eyes of my dog. Because as Sadhguru said, if you want to know what love is, get a dog.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your time and attention, and thanks, Oksana. And
Thank you, Bob.
I faced my own death so many times that I take very little seriously now, and I reckon most of the time I'm just playing the role of the trickster, Okay. Have a great time. It's lovely connecting with you, and see you around, and look forward to the next time when we can connect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
No worries.
Have a good day. Well, Damian, I am curious to talk about another topic. Is the feminine lineage of womb mysteries. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. So that is to be found within many varying different cultures. My own personal connection with such comes through ancient Egypt and pre-Pharaonic ancient Egypt, which was a matriarchal society rooted within relationship with the divine feminine. And linking that back to what we were speaking about in terms of awakening, if we look at awakening having those two movements, one being the more, shall we say, masculine aspect, which is that transcendent opening into freedom and the dissolution of egoic identity and our relationship with our story, our conditioning, our habitual response mechanisms to life. The feminine aspect would be more the sense of the opening to that through the body and the relationship of freedom through form in that way. And so if we look at a lot of the yogic practices, these tend to be coming more through the masculine school, and so that sense of that sort of movement into transcendent bliss in a certain way, but that can be quite removed from reality.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people sort of sitting in meditation, blissed out, and they're basically in samadhi states in a certain way. The feminine lineage is really that sense of how is that sense of freedom brought into the world? How is that expressed through heart and through form in that way? And
Wow.
That's really at the core of my work. It bridges through that particular lineage and that relationship with Divine Mother. If we think of the role of Divine Mother, and we just, from the sense of common sense, what do we think of when we think of Divine Mother? We think of that sense of love, compassion, nurturance, care for child in that way. And so that whole feminine lineage has that particular sort of flavor to it in that way. Whereas when we think of the masculine, we might think of it, the father, as having that role also, but coming through a different flavor in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And what else can I say about that? Yeah, also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that it's core of your work. It's beautiful.
Yeah. There's also a certain focus of the element of the tantric path that links in with such. Very misunderstood in the West, in my opinion. A lot of neo-tantric practice related to sexuality, not really part of what I would term traditional tantric practice in that way. Traditional tantric practice, to my understanding, is much more related to that sense of cutting through delusion. And in traditional tantric practice, Divine Mother is really seen as that element of wisdom, that clear seeing of reality, that cutting through delusion. So there's also a very strong element of that which comes through this particular feminine lineage, in terms of that sense of the compassionate action of the mother revealing reality to us. If you think of the ultimate act of compassion being to free us from suffering, and the cause of our suffering being that we don't truly actually see reality as it is. We live from out of this very limited, conditioned sense of self. And so the ultimate act of compassion on the part of the mother being to awaken us from out of that. And sometimes that can be in a very gentle way, and sometimes that can be in not quite so gentle ways, which will shake us up from out of our sleep. And we need to be shaken at times, but it's coming from compassion and it's coming from love, because we're so enmeshed in that story and that idea of the sense of self. It's only really when something in life happens that shakes us out of that, just suddenly we go, oh, what happened there? In that way. That's really also a core element of this feminine pathway, that action of compassion, which is serving to awaken us, serving us to bring us out of the dream.
Well, it's interesting. The reason I'm finding this very interesting, and I already knew some of this information before, is because I am a dancer, and to me, connection to body, I've realized, plays a big role in this ascension or awakening process, because I started out as addressing my physical issues and realized that there's such a big picture out there. But then again, my spirituality was always kind of present in my life. There was never too much disconnection, but I didn't really realize the bigger picture of it, that how much we have to actually connect to our body. To get out, we have to get in. Yep. That's what they say. So, absolutely. And I realized how much it is important how you view your body and connect with it, and energetically, especially how you move through life with your body. So I find it very interesting. That's why, and how long you've been really connected with that, I guess.
Um, Probably around about 15 years or so. Around about the time that I spoke about earlier, where I had the near-death experience when I was 13, and then an experience of about 8 or 9 years where I was very out of body uh, in a certain way, and very, very expanded and very open. A lot of that psychic phenomena that I spoke about occurring, and then that shift around 15 years ago, my sort of early 20s, where there was a sense of coming back into the body and really grounding into form and all of that stuff in the body that had been avoided. Uh, all that just ancestral stuff that's pumping through our genetics, all of the stuff that we've inherited from our mother and our father, uh, that core genetic program which is just pumping survival through the body 24/7, that we're not even really conscious of, but we're unconsciously coming from in most of our actions. And really the unraveling of all of that through the body, through the genetics, so that that higher dimensional light consciousness essence of who we are, what we are, can really actually embody through the form. Because otherwise it's kind of veiled or obscured by all of that stuff that's just sitting in the body in that way. And so at the core of ourselves, we can be deeply awake to the true nature of reality, but surrounding all of that, there's still all this stuff in the body that's sitting there, that's somehow veiling that in a certain way. And so all of that also needs to be transmuted and transformed if we're really to actually bridge that through the form, through the energy system, really actually live that here. And that was certainly part and parcel of my process through my 20s, early 30s, and ongoing.
That actually sounds amazing. We were just, yeah, we were just listening to you here. Um, so that's quite amazing to hear. And we were actually discussing that we will be chatting with you a little bit later because we have some expansions on business side of the radio show, and we have some ideas for you, Damian. So we'll be talking to you about it. But what I wanted to talk to you about is your work. Um, how can we, how can our listeners find you, and what do you have going on in regard to publicity, or where can they find books if you have them?
No. So I'm actually in the process of finishing writing my first book. It's not published as of yet, but will be out hopefully within the year end of, if not the beginning of next year.
Mm-hmm.
And that the information about that will be up on my websites. My websites are www.sourcematrix.co.uk and www.awakeningheart.co.uk. The Source Matrix site is more about my work in general, sessions, artwork that I offer, and then the Awakening Heart website is more specifically focused around the courses that I offer, and those are rooted within that lineage of feminine womb mysteries that I very briefly touched upon. And those courses look at awakening also in tandem with healing. And if we look at healing as the process through which we are releasing that conditioning and transforming that, releasing what veils the expression of our awake essence through form. And then the awakening, as we deepen into a clearer awareness and embodied realization of what we truly are, actually taking healing deeper as we realize that we are not our conditioning. So they work hand in hand with one another in that way. And session wise, there are 3 particular sessions that I offer, and those relate to the 3 aspects of the awakening pathway that we touched upon in terms of love, light, and power. So the first is really focusing on that development of the heart and development of that essence of love and stepping into that, developing compassion for ourselves. And the second is that development of light and wisdom and clarity and that deep alignment with truth. And then the third is that stepping into power and that essence of surrender to divine flow in that way. Much more information is on the website. I'm just giving a very brief description here for the sake of the time that we have with one another. And the other aspect of the work that I offer is code work, which I think you have seen some of, and that's in the form of art and also in the form of sound. I used to work in the music industry many a year ago, singing opera, and part of that is now involved in the healing work and the language of light, which is a language that expresses divine energy and consciousness with the purpose of really transforming consciousness, awakening consciousness. And that comes through in the artwork and in the sound work. And if listeners are familiar with mandalas or mantras, in a similar way to that, so sitting with those creates a shift within one's energy and consciousness and certain openings which can support the process of awakening, support the process of ascension, and support the process of embodiment with that. And again, more information is available on the website. I go into a lot more detail there around such, and you can gain a much greater, clearer understanding of those offerings through the websites.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the tour of your contact information, which we actually can post on our Facebook page, so everyone can go back and grab those pages, links from there. But Damian, thank you so much. It's been an amazing show. We have a few minutes left to finish up here after we depart. But yes, do you have any last words, I guess, before heading out with words that you can leave us with?
Yeah, just really to again come back to that simple practice that I spoke about a little earlier, and really to emphasize the depth of that, and that even sitting in that way for 10-15 minutes, I know through my own personal experience, has really transformed my experience of life in a very deep way. And it's a very simple practice, but something that everybody can do. And again, it's not something that one has to intellectualize in that sense of, am I doing this right or am I doing this wrong? That's sitting with one's direct experience of what is here, just really dropping into the heart, even for 10-15 minutes a day, sitting there, opening to oneself, opening to the truth, and just allowing that to arise without any expectation in that way. And that would be a final message and an invitation that I would offer to whoever is listening to this as something that can greatly benefit them on their path.
Thank you. I agree. I cannot agree more. Um, Knowing oneself leads to knowing everything or not knowing anything. More you know, more you realize you don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah, it really
all right.
is that surrender into mystery.
Oh yes, that's. I think that is the biggest lesson. Well, if it is a lesson after all or not, is to really surrender to unknown and the mystery. Yes. Yeah. Well, it has been wonderful, and we definitely will stay in touch, and hopefully we'll bring you back very soon with more topics to talk about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Damian. And I'm not sure, is it night, evening, morning there on your side
Yes,
right now?
it's 1 a.m. here, so it's very early
1
morning.
a.m. Wow. Well, I guess very early good morning.
Thank you. I'm gonna go and get some sleep shortly.
Yeah, or good night. Yes. Well, you have a great the rest of your time, and we will stay in touch. Definitely. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so
time
much.
today.
Much love.
Much
Bye
love and
bye.
light.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Well, that was another amazing show that we had today, and in the last few minutes, I guess what we will do, well, first I will be reposting the contact information for Damian Nola on our Organic Frequency Radio page on Facebook, and also follow us on Instagram. We started to post information there as well. Um, and after that, what I will do is give my information if you guys want to connect with me for my mind, body, and heart integration classes, you can find me online. I have classes posted on my Vimeo on demand. It's vimeo.com underscore actually backslash Oksana Ganchar, OXANAGONCHAR, backslash VOD underscore pages. Please go there if you'd like to connect to your body, mind, and emotions through movement, meditations as well. And also stay in touch with me in regard to my workshops and retreats. And if you would like to receive information about anything that is coming up, then email me at beancientwisdom@gmail.com or even call me 202-930-2530 and just connect with me if you'd like to have any more information. And Stephanie, I have to actually look it up because she had to step out. Stephanie, you can email her at, I believe, Stephanie at edensbalance.com. Or just find us on Facebook at Organic Frequency Radio, and we post everything there. So with this, I think I will end our show. Guys, check us out next Monday, 3:30 p.m. is actually West Coast time, USA, and we will be with another great guest that I don't have a name for, but check us out on Facebook and Instagram for that. And we will chat with you next week.